Welcome to Bankable. I'm Doreen Abisundra, your host and a proponent of innovative technology and financing solutions for AI infrastructure, decarbonization, and energy security.
If geothermal heat is actually viable in Singapore, it will be something that we can call literally our own.
Karda One is to tell us that there is a very long way to go before we are able to harness all the energy. And so we have a lot of work to
do. Welcome, everyone. This is the podcast that we're going to focus on geothermal. I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to let our two guests talk about it and make a description. So let's start very quickly with introductions. An overview to you, Jonathan. Tell us a little bit about who you are personally and what has brought you here to this point.
So thanks, Doreen, for inviting me to just share of the work that we have done and also share a bit about Singapore as well. So I'm Jonathan. I'm actually born in Singapore. I did my studies literally like for the past at least 10 years in geology, mineral resources, and then going all the way from now back in Singapore to do my postdoc. So right now I'm in NTU, working at Nanyang Technological University. It's one of the oldest public universities in Singapore itself. So I have been working on the geothermal project that oversaw a deep drilling campaign that really uncovered that at 1.76 kilometers, we have 122 degrees. And we think that if we were to drill deeper enough, we might be able to get some source of geothermal heat and it can be used for electricity or non-electricity generations. So even though, yes, I'm a geologist, but I've also have been quite interested in like large systems, large earth systems, say like volcanoes or occurrence of earthquakes. So say, for example, during my PhD, I did my work at the Athabasca Basin. We're looking at non-conformity uranium deposits itself, and it's been kind of focused on a very key ancient structure of 1.8 billion years, because they are actually quite important when it comes to the generation of ancient structures. And these ancient structures are actually key for giant mineral deposits to form.
Nicolas, on my left, tell us a little bit about who you are as a person and your career that has brought you to this point here today.
So thank you, Doreen, for inviting us and for having this podcast. Pleasure to do it with you. So who is Nicolas? My background, I grew up in Haiti, so very early was immersed into the cities and energy industry. Then I specialized in energy projects, which brought me to West Africa, where I got to develop from scratch energy projects, bringing electricity into communities that never had power before. So very unique types of challenges I got to experience starting energy projects where there's nothing, so just greenfield projects in communities, and looking for other opportunities around the world, because these projects were very small scale, and there's something in me that wants to create much larger types of energy projects and impact. And moved to Singapore over a little more than a year ago now, and I've been developing a geothermal energy project. I think it's a very interesting opportunity for Singapore, which is looking for alternatives. Exciting to explore that space.
Brilliant, fantastic. We're talking about Singapore here. Tell us very simply, what does geothermal mean for Singapore? Where is geothermal even possible in Singapore?
So for a very broad context, geothermal actually exists all around the planet. So the based on the advancement of current technology, especially for drilling and heat extraction technologies, you can actually drill to whatever depth that you can. But the only limiting factor is how expensive is that drilling Drilling to say 5 kilometers, for instance, takes about say 25 million to 30 million dollars to just to get there first. So, while in the context of Singapore, because we are not, we do not have many. Actually, we do not have any natural resources. If geothermal heat is actually viable in Singapore, it will be something that we can call it truly our own. And I think in current times where geopolitical tensions are quite rampant and very uncertain, energy prices are also uncertain as well. Finding of these natural resources is also part of national security context. So, in my perspective, I think that is critical especially for Singapore.
Now let's move on to what each of you does for your day jobs. Starting with you, Nicolas, tell us a little bit about your company and what exactly you're looking to achieve.
So we're Karda One, and
Do you want to say that name again?
Karda One.
Okay.
Yeah, Karda One. So it's a, give a bit of background. It's a aspirational name from the scientist in the 60s named Kardashev, who came up with the idea of civilizations, the type of civilizations. Type 1 civilization is one that harnesses all the energy that it receives on its host planet. So Karda One is to tell us that there is a very long way to go before we are able to harness all the energy. And so we have a lot of work to do. Our main project is to develop a geothermal program in Singapore that we're able to templatize and replicate across Southeast Asia. There are, as Jonathan was saying earlier, very key challenges to develop energy projects when it comes to geothermal because it's very expensive with conventional drilling methods in order to get the level of technology so far to go at the depth where you find the heat resources that are high enough to power steam turbines. So what we're focused on is to attract the right set of partners and stakeholders in Singapore to figure out subsurface, figure out where it is actually safe to drill, first of all, because when we drill, you are impacting a very stable or not so stable environment. So my day job is to figure out it's the beginning of the industry here, figure out the right partners who have experts to put around the table that goes and creates a package that is, at the end of the day, financeable, which means insurable in a very tight siting context in Singapore. We are working on the bankability of the first program.
Brilliant. And Jonathan, what about you? What keeps you busy during the day?
So for my case, it'll be a lot of reading. I mean, just to get in touch with the latest developments. So for like modeling the type of heat extraction methods that has been generated. But at the same time, also trying to pitch various ideas to stakeholders. So say like government, for example, because our project was initially funded by the government itself, but we want to move, now that project is completed, so we want to move past that, going to more of a phase 2.
Maybe just describe that project that was funded.
So I was actually one of the key scientists involved in the deep drilling project. It was funded by the National Research Foundation to NTU, Nanyang Technological University, together with the Technical University of Munich, that create building. So we actually embarked like a deep drilling program at the northern part of Singapore to drill 2 wells at Admiralty Lane and at Sembawang itself, the deepest well reaching up to 1.76 kilometers. So we try to gather as much data as we can. So we have like at least 3 kilometers of rock cores, and the subsurface temperature was like 122 degrees. So from those kind of measurements, we took that values and tried to do some techno-economic analysis. And we found that under the most idealized case, you have a generation cost probably about at least 47%. So, but that's still simulation work. there's still a need to actually validate those simulations. So the only way to move forward is literally drill another hole. So that's where I'm at the moment. So I'm kind of strategizing it with my principal investigator, Professor Alessandro, and also trying to work out with various programs and also try to get additional people coming into it. Because in terms of expertise regarding geothermal, geoscientists, and various engineers, say like heat transfer or fluid dynamics itself, we are quite limited. So there's a need to kind of get more people involved itself.
And presumably all this research, Nicolas, is of interest and of value to the business that you're developing. And what lessons have you taken, not just from what Jonathan is doing, but perhaps from other parts of the world where geothermal has been proven to some extent?
Yeah, the work that the NCU has been doing in Singapore is instrumental in even our interest in developing geothermal projects in the country. The level of study that needs to be done, there's a long way to go still to understand the subsurface island-wide. The government has taken that as a priority and are doing a lot of the front loading the work and the studies that are needed to understand what type of heat resource and what type of subsurface type we're talking about, and then from there, downstream from there, figuring out the opportunities and the risks. So there's still a bit of ways to go. Like Jonathan mentioned, there is a nascent industry here, and so it's a big challenge or challenge opportunities to attract the right experts and the right talent and to work on this very unique context, I should say. When you take lessons from around the world, you might see your typical geothermal project would be somewhere that is pretty far from residential or industrial infrastructure. So the risk appetite for end-use CCD is a different risk profile. Don't forget where we are in Southeast Asia, where fortunately we have more than 400 gigawatts powered by coal. So it's an immense opportunity for able to create this template of projects that can now understand the subsurface properly, will reach these depths safely, and have a heat source that could change that could be a replacement for the coal that we're currently using around the region. So how that fits into us, we are a private sector developer. Our main focus is to bring in capital to support and accelerate the time to grid for a geothermal project and the whole program in Singapore. So putting off-takers at the table, putting insurers at the table, putting obviously the regulator, but mainly in this first context, the expert community from around the world.
And you've picked on the word that makes investors and bankers always awake at night: risk. But understanding risk makes projects bankable. So maybe, Jonathan, tell us a little bit about the potential risks there and the mitigants for them.
Well, I can tell you for one thing, if the project is actually to move forward is not funded, then the people who actually were involved in the recent deep drilling project will be kind of out of work. So there is really a potential risk, or more like guaranteed risk, to actually lose that information and capabilities itself. That wouldn't spell very well. So most geothermal projects are usually conducted away from urban areas. So say, for example, like Fellow Energy in Utah. So they have kind of occupied quite a bit of land, but it's within the Nevada desert, if I'm not wrong, itself. So that is really away from any urban, any township, and it's very, and the amount of land that actually needs to conduct the drilling is really impressive. But in the context of Singapore, I think the most important risk to consider is more on the in already induced seismicity and environmental issues, and these things need to be studied like very heavily itself. So there's still quite a bit of simulation work that needs to be done. For example, like a foundational model, and maybe using AI, try to say all the various combinations itself. So that was one project that we tried to look into and see whether we can actually get the funding. That's one possible way. But at the same time, what about on the surface? Because Singapore is land scarce, so any parcel of land has to be maximized and optimized to the best of it. So either through pure power production, or maybe it can be integrated with some other mixed developments itself. So that has to be looked into.
Got it. And from a private sector,
I would say in a sense, what the work that Jonathan, you and around the international community of experts are doing to really understand, get data and understand what the subsurface is like when you interact with it in any kind of way. So whether it's creating structures or creating networks, fractional drilling pipes, essentially. So we are different competing approaches of ES and EGS that will be matched to the subsurface rock that you have down there, and depending on depth, understanding fault systems, understanding when you interact with this subsurface, how it will likely react.
got it. So different types of surfaces require different types of drilling and skill sets.
I would say different type of drilling would be more appropriate to reduce the seismic and or if you know that this type of subsurface would not be suitable, you would not be able to reduce the seismicity. It tells you that's not where you should be drilling. You should be drilling somewhere else. So it's a question of matching the approach with what you have in the subsurface.
Got it.
That's one aspect of it. This is a very core and the main risk that we need to understand how other places have typically dealt with this, and we're trying to take these lessons learned and apply them to create very, very threshold baseline. This is what I was mentioning. You start with small kind of. From there, you see what the results are, and you kind of validate your planning or what the modeling was telling. And from there, you can start really understanding if we continue down that route, we can either get above a threshold of acceptable seismic activity or not. And that's how I create, typically that is called the traffic light system. You have a typical green, orange, and red, and you know what to do in each case. You mitigate the side of risk from that perspective. And then from there, that's one part of the risk. The other types of risk are your typical risks that you see in any kind of energy projects, right? So
which have all been mitigated in large extent.
They have, and now you need to apply them into that context, into the Singapore context. You have your normal stakeholder risk, which is Singapore. We're very lucky to be in a stable environment. You also have some technology risk because there are newer technologies that are coming out of the field test, going into production.
Mitigations?
Mitigations, if you say, for example, like induced seismicity, you need to have a very comprehensive observation for this type of thing. So for whatever has been employed in other power plants, so will need to be applied in Singapore. But considering that Singapore being a highly urbanized area, we'll definitely need to try out on a more smaller scale. So in terms of mitigating factors, we believe that starting with, say, a scientific drilling, a simple borehole first, create like a framework on how to approach mitigating those type of risks, and then if there's potential to expand, we'll more of a wait and see type of approach. So I think that's would be the best way of.
Brilliant.
There are very promising advancements with projects in Germany, for example. We have a new project coming out in Oregon with different approaches. So we spoke about the risk, but this is the opportunity that.
Brilliant. So we're now moving into the positives and their uses.
Why Fervo's energy project is so interesting because they're the ones that actually, created like a 400 megawatt geothermal power plant using enhanced geothermal systems. So basically, they are literally artificially fracturing the rock to create like literally a radiator at depth, but using fractures to connect the various pipes as you drill deep below, generate power and send it to whoever really needs it. So you have like say data centers or maybe to the urban environments. But at the same time, you also have like other projects like in the UK, United Downs project, where they did more of what they term it as a European EGS project. So basically, they actually use a fault system as literally the connection point between the injection and the production well to generate steam, to generate heating and power at the same time.
And what does EGS stand for?
So EGS is enhanced geothermal system. So typically for granite, for granite, the permeability and porosity is actually very low. Mm-hmm. So that in order to extract the heat more, you need to increase it artificially. So either using of propellants or some gel to expand to literally create your own fractures within the rock itself. But in the case of United Downs, where you have this natural fault zone and it's full of fractures themselves, and they just use it to generate power. So it's quite interesting. So there are two different types of geothermal power plants.
Tell us, Nicolas, what apart from data centers, for example, that Jonathan has mentioned, why are you, for example, setting up a company here in Singapore to look at geothermal? What are the pluses that you see, not just for the energy use, but also for this particular niche?
Yeah. So we at Karda One, we want to be for our life not tied to one type of energy solution. So the reason why we focused on geothermal in Singapore is because looking at all the other alternatives that the island has, we feel that this is the industry and the approach that needs to be pushed, and that the opportunity is immense for. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity in Singapore is immense to get more power sources. Building Singapore is a key stakeholder in building the housing grid because Singapore doesn't have enough energy sources right now. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity for Singapore to have a local, homegrown base load that is clean is immense. Mm-hmm. And geothermal is that exact opportunity to have a source of power that is 24/7, that is also able to compete on a cost basis, ideally with gas, which is in itself, like Jonathan was mentioning, it's based on market fluctuations, very geopolitically tied. Having a dependence on the fluctuations of prices of gas is a national security concern. And also, we all know the other externalities. You have carbon being emitted. We're trying to have net zero in the foreseeable future. Sure. So it's the idea that you can have aside from nuclear, which is another path that is being heavily invested in Singapore, we think that geothermal is the other most likely technology that will unlock a clean pathway for Singapore to this power.
So effectively, you do see a commercial, profitable opportunity to invest in geothermal in Singapore.
Yeah, there is a clear case that starting with a small project that is being more expensive. As a
Sure.
first of a kind project is always more expensive.
Yeah.
But there's a clear case that with more data, understanding what the subsurface is, understanding how to mitigate the risk factors, and create the framework for a first of a kind to be insurable, right? Ensuring this is not straightforward. So if we're able to gather enough data to make the first project bankable, the opportunity is immense. And it's a question of having the data sets and the modeling that informs what these insurance packages will look like and how much risk the government actually able to accept.
Fantastic. Maybe Jonathan, this is where you need to come in from a local perspective and also as a research person to tell us where is that vision.
So I will usually I will kind of pivot to or take a cue from what Fellow Energy has done. So there are actually EGS geothermal company based in the US that has literally done 2 projects on geothermal power generation itself. So one of their solutions, the current solution named called CAPE project, CAPE project itself, is literally use what we call a multi-well system. So you have like a giant well pad of a certain size, and each well pad will have at least 5 holes, 5 wells drilling quite deep. The estimated power density of that type of system is about 37 megawatts per square kilometer, which comparing to say like a single vertical well of say like 5 kilometers, the power density of that is actually very, very low. So you're now talking about, in terms of Singapore itself, you can actually scale it to have, say, you can start, say, from a very large well pad. And if there is significant, if the temperatures are suitable and the geomechanical portion is kind of suitable for EGS or some other fracturing technologies, or maybe even employ advanced geothermal systems, which basically install a radiator pipe. And the thing about geothermal is you can actually have these wells at, say, multiple locations. And the pipes that link to, say, like a central power turbine, for example, or some district cooling network itself, I think the capacity of it can be scaled as high, can be quite large. So there is potential for scaling, but of course, such projects are expensive. So to mitigate the risk and to ensure the bankability of it, well, has to start first, and then we'll proceed onwards. So we'll want to approach it. Yes, we want to reach there, but we have to start from one well. Additionally, if the project, if geothermal power or geothermal energy actually succeeds in Singapore, I kind of also envision the geothermal industry, because yes, you have drilling, yes, you have these geoscientists, yes, you have these engineers being trained in this, but you have like other supporting industries.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And from your perspective, Nicolas, what are your needs as a company from a finance perspective? Can you give us some idea on costs, on capex, or where you are in that financing journey?
Sure. So if I could draw a parallel, it's geothermal is you are looking to access a resource that is a subsurface resource that is heat. You could draw a parallel to the oil industry, where you go and find a fossil fuel resource that you transform into heat and burn. In terms of needs, you're looking so right now the needs are for development.
DevEx, development expenditure, capital, got it.
Which is funding all the research alongside the public sector, and we come in as a private sector, making these studies much more specific to the off-takers that can be the anchors for these. You could co-locate a geothermal project and say, we're going to investigate this area and understand what the opportunity is to bring a heat source out of the ground to either use as a direct heat cooling, for example, or transform that heat into electricity if your temperature is high enough.
So maybe just give me some sense of money, numbers-wise? Are we talking 1 million a megawatt, 10 million a megawatt, or is it still too early to say?
It's very early in terms of a first-of-a-kind project. I would say anyone looking at these types of projects, and it's not necessarily for the Singapore context. Singapore context has to still be discovered. There's a lot to discover, right? You don't know what temperature, at what depth you could go, and at what depth you should go. In a sense, and depth is your primary cost driver, right? So depth is also driven by your temperature gradient. So as every kilometer you're going down, how much hotter are you getting? Right? So I think the early work that Jonathan's group has been doing has discovered in the Sembawang area is very interesting, very promising. Already finding 122 degrees out of 1.7 kilometers is very interesting. This is some of the best heat gradient that you can find, and at that, let's say in the best of worlds, that heat gradient would continue down the line. So as you're going deeper, that heat gradient doesn't reduce. You could typically say maybe you were able to drill at a $4,000 or $5,000 meter. If you're able to do that, a project starts making sense. Right? This is the cost of conventional drilling so far.
Fantastic. I suppose now we need to know what we need from a person capacity. So from an education, from a workforce, from a skill set. Maybe let's start with you, Jonathan. I mean, you're just superbly trained, but if we want to be Jonathan, what do we need to know, and what do we need to do?
I think to realize geothermal development in Singapore, there must be some level of courage to actually just go ahead. But as long as we have some data to back up those claims. So going back to the deep drilling program, that what we did, we only had a few data points based on temperature. And the reason why we focus our efforts at the northern part of Singapore, because there is a hotspot, or let's say a thermal anomaly at the surface. Even though the temperature map that we have generated and we have used and presented all over appears to be, you can dispute, you can criticize it quite a bit, but that's all we have. So whatever limited data we have, we just went for it and look at what results that were generated.
I mean, just from an education perspective or a workforce perspective, what is it that we needed to be here? Is it a certain qualification? Is it a certain mindset, courage? I'm going to bring it back to Nicolas because he's moved from Haiti to West Africa to Singapore.
Why I use courage first, because it is what we have done so far is actually pretty courageous. Actually, I had a chat with one person from EMA saying that if we
just tell us what's EMA?
Energy Market Authority in Singapore. So they're the ones that oversaw the geothermal project itself, and this person commented, say that nobody had the courage to actually do and drill what we have done, what you all have done. Must more be appreciated of how dynamic the Earth is. So say Singapore geological setting, for instance, we're actually sitting on a very stable continent, and there has been formed over 300 million years ago. The granite that you see at Bukit Timah Hill, that was formed like 230 million years, and it has been there. We have mined granite out of it, but now it has been brought into the spotlight because these granites can be classified as what we call intrusions. Basically, it's like mantle injections from deep below to the surface, and it's kind of housed there. The one at the US where Fervo Energy is kind of located, their granite deposit is a lot younger, so hence it's very, very hot. So
Singapore is older.
It's older, so that's why the temperature gradient may not be as high as what is in Utah itself, but the principle is like almost the same. But whether is it whether it's bankable for a geothermal project to be in Singapore, I think we should give it a go regardless.
Given you've highlighted courage, I have to turn to you, Nicolas. Not just courageous in kind of your journey as a person, but just setting up something that is so new in a nation that is so small as well. So tell me more tell us a little bit about why you have that courage to do that here, and a little bit more of the skill set that has given you that ambition and the courage to continue.
Sure. I think for any entrepreneurial journey, the courage is the first ingredient that is probably needed. Maybe a little bit of craziness, I would say. But in terms of coming back to what skill set in the back end is pushing it more towards courage and less towards craziness, is we look at how the wind industry has come from first of a kind, very expensive projects going from land wind turbines going to offshore wind turbines.
Now floating even.
Yeah, exactly. And you take the solar industry that has gone, what Germany has done in the early part of the century here is basically finance and bootstrap the energy, the solar industry for the world. They've been paying the price for that, but we should be very thankful to Germany for doing that. But they've installed solar power everywhere in the country, even though it's not the most sunniest parts of the world, right? So it takes a lot of courage to take these first of a kind of risk, understand what the opportunity is down the line, what is the holy grail that we're going for, and build these capabilities over time. Right? So in terms of skill sets that is necessary, I've been doing greenfield projects in some of the most challenging parts of the world where technology access has been, for many reasons, hampered, and trying to bring energy into these communities in a way that is cost-effective, that is replicable, and that shows a downward cost path. Right? So these learnings that I think are integral to take from a harsh environment, very difficult to create projects into, and now take these learnings into a context that is where the challenges are different, but very translatable. So we need to take first of a kind risk, understand what the risk level that are acceptable are, figure out the right path to finance that risk. The capital allocators have this risk, right? And create the replication pack where now that can be scaled not only within Singapore, but also for the broader region.
So you're acting as the catalyst for further growth.
Yes.
Brilliant. So in a nutshell, if you had one last thing to say about geothermal, I'm going to give you the penultimate word, Nicolas, and the final word to you, Jonathan. What's the must-do for geothermal?
I think the must-do right now is to, as the trend is going, to be courageous and go for understanding the risks, understanding the opportunity to its fullest extent. So it means funding more studies, pushing what the Energy Market Authority has been jump-starting already. So I think the private sector has a large role to play. So we are, as Karda One, inviting partners and experts from around the world to help us make more sense of that opportunity. Put some exact numbers on the risk levels and the types of technology that we need to bring about, and invite off-takers to be part of that conversation to reserve their share of power. We're looking to bring to the grid, hopefully before 2030.
Brilliant, fantastic. You've given us a time frame. Jonathan, last word.
So I would say it's drill-bait drill, but more in the context of drilling for clean energy, understanding our subsurface, but at the same time training the new generation.
It's been fantastic learning about geothermal from you guys. And I welcome that courage that sits with you both and admire the conviction that you have to at least try to pursue something that is new and that's relevant.
Thank you for listening to Bankable. For early access to energy transition pioneers and to learn how to structure the investment solutions described in this episode and throughout the series, subscribe to the podcast and get in contact at frescocleantech.solutions.